what we're here for. You don't have to come back to 3 o'clock, by the way. This is your one opportunity to be able to learn more about what we're doing with strategic planning, and I'd encourage other people that you work with that couldn't make this to be able to make the 1 and 3. It's essentially the same presentation. Had an opportunity, 12 or 13 years ago, to come to know Tom Wunderle while he was working at Lewis & Clark for IBM. About 6 years ago at Western Texas, there was a desperate need for a strategic plan, and Tom's the first person that I thought of. And I made him trek to the godforsaken hinterlands of West Texas over the course of several months to put together what I thought was a great strategic plan, which helped us immensely. He has been contracted by the college to do the same thing here, even more extensively than what we did at Western. It's going to take us to the end of the school year to get this complete. Many of you, I've been so absolutely pleased with the participation that everybody was involved in the surveys. Not just how many people participated, but how many people took the time to write their thoughts on the surveys. There's going to be some interesting conclusions that come from that work that Tom now is here to drill down with various focus groups to try to find out the underlying reasons why some people had certain feelings about the institution. But that sets up today's kickoff, where he can give you a more thorough explanation of what we're doing and what we'll be doing over the course of the next year. This is not just a plan in that it's going to be printed on the homepage. What comes out of this are real projects to deal with real problems. And that's what Tom's been asked to do. So would you please welcome Tom Wunderle.
Thank you, Dr. Dreith, for that greeting. And I'd like to second what he said about the response to the surveys and the interviews and that. You know, I've done a lot of strategic planning, an awful lot of interviews, and I schedule those in advance. This is the first time that every single person, I've done 28 interviews so far, every single person was there waiting by the phone when I called. There's always some times when somebody forgets or it's not on their calendar or whatever, and that's just one indication of the commitment I think that this team here has for the strategic planning. And the good news is we had a wonderful response to the surveys. The bad news is we had a wonderful response to the surveys, so my work is really cut out for me. I've already gone through, done all the primary analysis. Now I have to go back and look at it, and those open-ended questions are really, really helpful, because you can only do so much with survey data. You can see patterns and trends and things like that, but you have to dig down deeper, and that's what those focus groups are for. What I'm going to try to do here in about 15 or 20 minutes, try to keep to that, is just give you kind of an overview of what a strategic plan is, how we're going to do it, how that impacts you, what our expectations are for us and for you, and hopefully answer those kinds of questions. I want to refer to a frequently asked question that will be posted on the website in the near future, I think within a week or so you'll be able to get on there and there'll be more information about it. I don't know, how many of you are hockey enthusiasts here? All right, well, at least one, great. You probably didn't know Wayne Gretzky was not only a great hockey player, but he was a great strategic thinker as well. And when he was asked, what his strategy is for hockey, he said, I skate to where I think the puck will be. And that's kind of the essence of strategic planning is you want to be ahead of the curve. You need to kind of think about where you're going, where you should be going, what your priorities ought to be, what resources ought to be directed to those priorities. And all kinds of things come to mind that, for example, that he had to think about. He had to think about what his strengths were, his team strengths, the purposes, the rules of the game, opportunities and threats, the game plan, the arena. So you got to think about all those kinds of things. And that's part of the front end of the strategic planning process that I'll talk a little more about. But it's called the environmental scan. And that's where you basically look internally and externally at the strengths and weaknesses, the opportunities and threats, the mandates, the change drivers, and those kinds of things that set you up for deciding, okay, now that we know where we are, let's decide where we want to go. And the challenge here is to get from A to B, and we'll figure out how to do that and make recommendations for that. By the way, the Gretzky quote came from a book by a gentleman named John M. Bryson. who was one of multiple influences that I had in the strategic planning method that I use. But it's a great book. It's been around for 16 years. If anybody's interested in the background on how to do this strategic planning for public and nonprofit organizations, I would recommend that to anybody. So this is just an excerpt from the frequently asked questions. What is a strategic plan? Now you can give a long-winded definition. It's a disciplined process. I tried to be kind of practical here. It's a document that defines an organization's priorities in the form of goals and objectives, usually for the next 3 to 5 years. A long time ago, strategic plans were 10 years, sometimes even 20 years, but in the rapid pace of globalization, technology, and things change too quickly. You would be setting yourself up for failure if you didn't do this more frequently. So we say at least 3 to 5 years. In this way, you can align your resources that are in a way with the priorities to optimize the impact and effect that those resources have on the college. And a strategic plan is by definition more long-term and less detailed than would be an operational or tactical plan. So we're not going to boil the ocean here. This is strategic. It's fairly high level, but it will get down to specific projects with project owners and milestones and things like that. Will this replace the Logan and 50 plan? Yes, it will. It's time to revisit that, and that's what this is all about. And again, I've already stated, organizations usually should be completing a strategic plan at least every 5 years. A lot of times they'll update it. I work continually with Lewis and Clark Communication, and we on a consistent basis, at least annually, update the plan and strategy. So why bother with a strategic plan? I think I've given you some ideas on that already, but it sets institutional priorities for the future. It directs limited resources where they'll have the most effect. And it reaffirms foundational statements of purpose and value. So as you'll see when I talk about what a strategic plan looks like, one of the first things we do is reaffirm the mission, the purposes, the values, and the vision. It inspires and guides the individual and collective effort to grow and improve. We're raising aspirations, we're hopefully raising quality and improving performance as we move along. And it complements and supports the new accreditation process, the Higher Learning Commission pathways that you are adopting as we speak, which is a continuous quality improvement model. For those of you in the corporate world, it's similar to the TQM model, where there's a lot of emphasis on your customers, measuring your progress, setting objectives and goals, and on an annual and continuing basis, reevaluating what you do. But this process or project also addresses specifically the 2007 Higher Learning Commission recommendations to do an environmental scan. The John Logan and 50 had one, but it wasn't as substantive as they would have liked to have seen. And it'll have actionable recommendations that stem from this strategy. So what does the strategic plan include? This is basically just a table of contents outline of what the document will look like. By the way, it will be in PowerPoint. My IBM experience goes back to actually IBM working with McKinsey and other consulting firms, and they decided that the typical narrative fashion strategic plans that we see tend not to be read because there's basically too many words. It's too difficult, and people don't want to sit there and kind of walk through all the narrative to get to the point, even with an executive summary. So the method that we used to use in IBM that we adopted from McKinsey is a PowerPoint method that includes elements of what they call vertical logic and horizontal logic. And that is that the top of every page is a thematic sentence, basically. That the horizontal logic is that you can really understand the whole strategic plan by flipping through and just reading that top sentence on each one of those. That's the horizontal logic. Vertical logic is that everything's underneath that statement supports and elaborates on whatever that statement happens to be. So that's really what I'm going to use here. That'll be the output document, and it'll have an executive summary of usually about somewhere between 6 and 10 pages. And typically these reports, without survey data in them are 80 pages long or something like that. But it's a quick read, more than likely not to get thrown in a drawer and forgotten with that kind of formatting. So it'll have an executive summary, background, and assumptions. What are the assumptions? Well, a couple that we've agreed upon internally are that we're going to be transparent and honest about this. We're not going to shy away from difficult questions in that. The other thing is that everything, in a sense, is fair game. So if there's something that we're doing, and I'll talk a little later about being consistent with our foundational principles, our mission, purposes, and values, if we're doing something that isn't quite aligned with that, we need to re-examine, revisit why we're doing that, and maybe shift what we're doing and change what we're doing. Even the mission statement, for example, is up for grabs. We're looking at that closely. Those of you who I've interviewed know that we talk about that. Is it still inspiring? Is it still accurate? Is it clear and concise? And then there's this concept called Good to Greatness. Somebody wrote a book about that. I did some work with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. They were really big onto that. I can't remember the name of the author. But the whole idea is that John Logan does a lot of things very well. And I know that now because I've talked to a lot of people and I've looked at the surveys and that. You're real good at engaging the community. You're real good at workforce development. You've got real quality programs and instruction. I can go on, and we will capture those as we do the SWOT analysis. But you can always be better, and that is, again, a part of this continuous quality improvement mentality that goes along with the Higher Learning Commission accreditation process. So we're not looking to achieve mediocrity. We're looking to get better at anything that we can. So I'm telling Mike, when we look at charts, we look at data charts, and we have, I look at that middle bar that may be neutral or may be effective, and over here is ineffective, over here it's very effective. And we may say, well, 60% are effective, but the approach we want to take is that's not good enough. How can we get that effective over to very effective or better? Maybe there's more that we can do. And those are some of the assumptions I think that we'll be adopting. The environmental scan, I already kind of briefed you on what that is. The change drivers, that's a term that's very specific to the Higher Learning Commission and to consulting and strategic planning. That means what's going on in the world around us, events, paradigms, whatever that are influencing us, our students, the students' future. So obviously things like the economy, climate change, globalization, more close to home, retirement changes, things like, and maybe the economy, its impact on manufacturing in this area. Those are the kinds of things we need to get on the radar scope, talk about them, make sure that we understand what they mean and the implications for the college so that we take those into account as we develop recommendations. I already talked about reaffirming the mission, vision, and values. And then we go through a gap analysis, and that assumes that you know where you are, which I just described. Also assumes you know where you want to go. And I was talking to Dr. Dreith this morning about that. You have a very brief vision statement, but I think we're going to do some work with the steering committee to kind of elaborate on that, to better define where we want to be in very specific areas. So whether that's enrollment, whether that's in effectiveness and efficiency, whatever that happens to be, define, it's almost a flip side of what we identify in the environmental scan. If we say, gee, we're doing pretty good here, but we can improve in certain areas, and I say, well, let's take that information and define where we want to be in 5 years. And that becomes the benchmark. And the gap analysis is deciding, how are you going to get from here where you are now? And let's say on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 is you're not there at all. You haven't even left the port. 5 is you're there. And we say, well, we're a 3. And that's this whole good to greatness concept. What's it going to take to get to a 4 or 5? That's really the method and approach that we're going to take. Out of that, you develop strategies and goals. A strategy, again, is a long-term way of a set of actions that you're going to take to achieve a goal. And you can discuss endlessly the difference between a goal and an objective. And I've been caught in that trap many times. But a goal is essentially just a long-term. It's more long-term, tends to be less measurable, and it's supported by a series of objectives. That will then be defined into specific projects which support. So a single project may support more than one goal, more than one objective, and it will have its own measurable objectives and milestones. And then that'll be put into an implementation strategy, which is a timeline that identifies what resources will be needed, what are the milestones again, who will own that project, and the person who's responsible to stand in front of the executive committee and the board and answer where we are in this thing. And then, of course, we'll identify next steps because the real challenge, it's hard enough doing a strategic plan, the real challenge is implementing it. And so you have to have in place an organization that is designed that way to make sure that the people are responsible to complete specific projects at specific points in time, and it gets done. Three planning principles that are fundamental to doing this right, giving the credibility of this process: strategic alignment. Recommendations must be consistent with what we say our mission is, what our vision is, and our values. It must be inclusive. It needs to engage the people who will be impacted or will impact this process. That's why all of you in one form or another have been or will be engaged either in the survey, interviews, and when sometime in the March timeframe we'll have a draft that you can review, and we'll be soliciting feedback not only from this group but from all the students and the public in general who will be invited to take a look at it. And actionable recommendations. It doesn't make any sense to recommend something that you don't have the resources or the capability to execute. So that's just a test along the way. What the process is: the data collection, environmental scan. Those are the things I'm doing right now. And then reaffirming the mission, purpose of the vision, values, and what will come out of that is a documented strengths, challenges, opportunities, change drivers, and mandates. That data will then go periodically at steps to a steering committee that's already been appointed. I believe there's 15 people on the steering committee, and they are representatives of the key functions in the college. And I asked specifically for people who would show up, would work hard on this, are smart, and would be committed to the project, as well as representatives of the function. And because it's a lot of hard work, there'll be, right now my tentative schedule is to have 4 steering committee workshops. They go about 4 hours. But there's work before that, work after that for the steering committee. But we will flesh through as a team. As I like to say, I'm the facilitator. Everybody in this room and people on the steering committee are what I call the SMEs, the subject matter experts. You guys know John Logan much better than I will ever know John Logan, and you know how it functions. And so I will depend on you, and I will depend on the steering committee to guide me along to say, you got it right, Tom, or you got it wrong, and that kind of thing. And in the process, ownership for this document is passed off to the steering committee, because at some point I'll be gone. And then ultimately, the board's role, besides participating, I've interviewed all of the board members at this point. It's their decision to accept or reject the recommendations that come out of this, and hopefully they will accept and endorse the final product, which will, right now my estimates is it'll be in May. Here's the timeline. And we actually started some preliminary work in September. I pushed it out till June, but you can see project initialization is where I sit down and develop the project plan and do some initial interviews with Dr. Dreith and his staff, and a lot of prep work. And then we actually started a little bit early. We've done a tremendous amount of work in a short time. In October, we did the surveys, most of the interviews, and that. And then we get into the gap analysis up there at the top, number 4, roughly that time period. And then start to develop strategies and goals and project implementation about that time frame. I'm expecting that we'll be finished in May, and we want to get as many projects out there as early as March or April if we can. We'll get some idea of what the funding needs are for this. And I tell you, a lot of times things, by the way, I won't be inventing new things all the time, but for example, your new administrative system, I know that that's something that you want and you need. That will probably be, so there may be existing projects, is what I'm trying to say, that will be on this plan, as well as those that are developed during this process. Who will participate? This is just an outline to show it. There'll be the president of the steering committee. The president will be on the steering committee, and me working together on these workshops. The board of trustees interviews. I've interviewed a couple of foundation board members and the staff. I've interviewed a whole bunch of employees at multiple levels. Of course, the survey and the focus groups, and we'll be interviewing students. I've only done one so far, but I'll be doing a few more. And you can see in the bottom, this is what we've done. 31 interviews. I've done actually 29 so far. 1,455 surveys, 4 focus groups, there'll be 4 steering committee workshops, and a web posting. So that's how we support the inclusiveness and the participation of folks. And by the way, I will probably present to the SGA, Student Government Association, at least once. There may be other venues. I'll be briefing the board periodically as time goes on. There's a lot of communications that goes on with this as well. So it's 20 minutes after, like clockwork. would like to open it up. I know it's pretty fast, and I wanted to get everybody in and out, because I know you're busy and you have a lot of things to do, but let me just open it up to any questions, anything. Wow, I must have done a great job. Well, I'd just like to say thank you, and you know, my call to action is stay tuned. I'm sure I'll be talking, I'll have a chance to meet people I've been talking to in interviews. I'm looking forward to that. And you know, we'll be continuing to communicate with people in Probe, but if anybody has any questions for me, you know, you can call the president's office, you know, they'll tell you how to get a hold of me. And I should have put my email address on here, but by the way, it's my first initial T, my last name Wunderle. And I don't know if you all knew Steve Wunderle, some of you did. I think he's a distant relative, I have to check that out. But twunderle at comcast.net. And we'll make sure that'll be on the fax, the frequently asked questions. So thank you, and stay tuned, and have a wonderful day.